mic check, please.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jennings.
I'm your host, Dr. Mike Brazier.
My name is John Gordon. I'll be your host.
And I'm your host, Katie Burke.
Welcome to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, the only podcast about all things waterfowl. From hunting insights to science-based discussions about ducks, geese, and issues affecting waterfowl and wetlands conservation in North America. The DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the Ducks Unlimited podcast. I'm your host, Chris Jennings. Joining me on the show once again today is Phil Bourjaily, the Ducks Unlimited magazine shotgunning columnist. Phil, welcome back to the podcast.
Hey, thank you very much for having me.
You know, we kind of came up with this idea based on a column that you had done not too long ago, and I think it's very fitting, and usually we do this early in the season, but this topic is always a very good subject to touch on, and it's traveling with a gun. Mm-hmm. You know, Phil, you travel with a gun a lot. I travel with a gun a lot. And you kind of base this column as kind of these are some pro tips to take away if you're planning on traveling with a gun. From your perspective, what is the most difficult thing traveling with a gun for you?
Honestly, for me, it's the anxiety. But I've never had any trouble traveling with a gun. The only mistake I have made that I took one gun the first time I went to Uruguay, and it broke the first day. And fortunately, everybody else had brought extras. And so the biggest piece of advice I have is don't be afraid to travel with a gun, and don't be afraid to travel with two guns. Because, you make a trip like that where there maybe aren't, I said we were lucky that other people in my group had guns, but if you go somewhere where there's not a gun store or a gunsmith or even, the best repair kit is always another gun.
Yeah.
So that's what I'd say is make sure that you've got an extra, because you don't want to be on that trip you've saved up and been thinking about all year and then get there and find that your gun doesn't work. And I can tell you it's horrible.
Yeah,
it happens.
I'd imagine. Now, not to get too far down this road, but when you mentioned traveling with two guns, I've done that several times, even flown into Canada with two guns. It's, one thing that makes it easier is some of the newer shotgun cases out there. Hard side, they've got wheels, they lock, they're already pre-set up for like the TSA locks and anything you wanted to put on them. Do you personally have a big case like that you use?
I do. It's not a new one, but it does have all the features you're talking about. And of those features, wheels are like the key thing.
Yes.
Because it's a two-gun case is pretty heavy. I've had one. I've had it for 20-some years. Not even sure who made it, but it's a big, solid case. It doesn't have place for TSA locks, which are new. Had not been. This is the first time, actually, I was traveling last week, and this is the first time I went on a trip where they kept asking me if my case had TSA locks on it. And for those of you who, like me, didn't know what those are, they're those little cable locks where you set the combination, and then their TSA can override the key if they have to with a master key. The other thing I learned is that at some airports, if you don't have every hole for a lock in your gun case, if every one of them doesn't have a lock in it, that makes them unhappy, and they will want you to go, to the to the convenience store there at the airport and buy some TSA locks and put them in the holes.
Really? Did they just do that to you recently?
They did, and this was in San Antonio, where a lot of people take guns to hunt, a lot of people take guns to the National Gun Club, so it's a gun-friendly airport. But they made a couple people in my group go get more locks for their gun cases. And so, and again, traveling with guns, I always worry about it. I've never had a problem. And you just have to do your homework, whether it's, domestic or international flight. Just always have to know, get updated, talk to people who've done it. And it's really not a problem.
Yeah, no, and now that you say that, with the holes missing on the case, I think the last time, if it would have been last year, what they did with mine is they just put those big zip ties. Because I had a basically like a master lock on each end. I wasn't using TSA locks either. And then they put the zip ties through the additional holes in the case.
Right.
So I guess
they also they zip tied put a big zip tie all the way around my case this time too, which is I think the first time I can remember that happening. Just to be extra secure. So they don't want anything to happen to your gun. It's not when you travel there. The story always, and again, it depends on the airport. But I flew back into Cedar Rapids, Iowa, where I fly into 2 years ago, and it was the last flight in late at night, and it was pouring down rain, and everybody's bags came off the carousel, and it was everything but my gun. And I was the last person left in the airport practically, and I was thinking, geez, this will be a long process. And then this kid came walking in, and he was soaking wet, and he had my gun case wrapped in plastic. And he said, "I saw you had a gun, and I wanted to make sure nothing happened to it, so I wrapped it up for you and brought it in." And yeah, I know, and that's I have no horror stories about traveling with guns at all, so I can't. I've never had to make a claim for any. I've had guns delayed, by a flight, and they come in on the next flight. I have not found that it's really a problem at all.
Yeah, no, I mean, and I think you hit the nail on the head there talking about, traveling with your firearm. It's really more like the anxiety of walking into the airport, you got to open it up, that process that I'm sure you've gone through a million times as well.
Yeah.
They don't really check it because most of the people at the airport counters, they're maybe not even gun people. So they don't even know what they're looking at. So you just kind of open it up and they glance at it and they're like, "Is it loaded?" And I'm like, "No, it's not loaded." Yeah. "Do you have any ammunition?" "No." Nothing in this bag, there's nothing in this case. And then they're like, "All right, you got the locks, lock it up. We'll take it from here." And then it's just like checking another bag. It's pretty easy.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to wait for the TSA agent. They'll take it back into whatever back room they inspect guns and then come back and give you a high sign that you can go on. And sometimes they don't. It all sort of varies from airport to airport, seems like.
Yeah, and that's in your column. You kind of mentioned get there maybe a little bit earlier than you would expect, because that's kind of what you were alluding to there. Sometimes it just takes a little longer. Yeah.
Then the one thing I would say, while I've never seen myself or anyone in any group I've been with have trouble having, with the gun getting damaged, I have seen gun cases that didn't survive the trip. And that's almost as bad because, the other function of your gun case, besides to protect your gun, is to protect itself so you can take your gun back when you go home. I remember we arrived in Buenos Aires or someplace and someone's gun case, the whole corner was gone and guns were fine, but we had to find a way to get those guns back. So the money you spend on a gun case is as much so that you have a gun case that you can keep on using, and then it will survive the trip and whatever might happen to it between the time you check and the time it gets on the airplane, as it is to protect your gun.
Yeah, you bring up a good point in the column too, where when you're talking about the gun case here, you also mentioned, don't forget a soft side gun case, because what we're talking about are these big, bulky, sometimes, I think I have a Browning one and a Plano one, and then I have a metal one that was an old Cabela's that you'd have to take the gun apart, and those are durable. They're super strong, waterproof, everything. But then when you get to where you're going, you don't want to have to drag that big case around, because a lot of states demand that you keep a gun in a case when traveling, so you couldn't even drive to where you're going to hunt, without technically breaking the law.
And it's a good idea just to keep your gun in that case anyway. I always do, because a lot of times I hunt with wood stock guns, regardless of what kind of hunting I'm doing, and I want my gun protected. So to have a case that you can take to the blind or whatever, you don't want to bring your hard case out there. So bringing a soft case is a good idea. I think I also mentioned in that column, and this is a tip I just picked up last year. A friend of mine showed up in camp, and his soft case and almost all of his other gear was in his gun case. He'd taken all the foam out, and he just packs his gun in his hunting stuff. And that way he can travel a lot lighter.
Yeah. That makes sense. Now, if you're going with 2 guns, you're probably, by the time you pack hunting gear and extra gun cases and all that, you're probably going to get close to that 50-pound limit, I would imagine.
Yes, you are. Yeah, because the case itself will weigh a lot.
Oh, yeah.
See, he just brought 1 gun and he just had a place he could put his hunting coat and some other things in there. And then the gun was just as padded as it would be in foam, his clothes. So...
Yeah, go ahead.
No, I thought that was pretty smart. I had not seen that before.
That's pretty smart. Now, I have had a couple different instances with issues at airports. I once flew into Detroit. I was going up to hunt Harson's Island, and I flew into Detroit and got there, and my gun never showed up.
Uh-huh.
And so I go over to the claims office, and they're busy, they're doing their thing, and I'm like, yeah, my bag didn't show up, and they're like, what's it look like? And I'm like, it's a big black, it's a gun case. And the lady was like, what's in it? And I was like, 2 12-gauge shotguns. And she immediately got on the walkie-talkie, and like there were officers there, and they came out.
Really?
Yeah, like 5 minutes later, this guy comes out carrying it. What they did was, it was so big that they set it off to the side and then forgot to put it back on when all the other luggage. So it was basically just sitting in the back right there. But they do take notice when you tell them that you've got multiple firearms that are missing in baggage claim.
Yeah, no, they don't want any lost guns any more than we want our guns lost.
Yeah. So. Now, ammunition wise and any other like shotgunning accessories, have you ever? I had an issue in Canada one time coming back. They took my choke tubes, which I thought was super weird, but I had them in a carry-on.
Yeah, they don't. Yeah, if it's a gun part, they don't want it. They don't want it in your carry-on.
Yeah, because
who knows? You and like 30 other people on board the plane could have each brought in a different gun part and put a gun together.
It's possible.
Probably not. Probably not. But no, those things have to. You can't bring those in. I just. It was a question where I came back from one hunting trip and went on another and forgot that I had put a knife in my backpack, that I carry on board the plane. And fortunately, that was at home. So the TSA guy said, you can take that back out to your car or leave it here. And it was a new knife. And I had time. I took it back out to my car. But a really good idea to check all your pockets and all your bags, especially if you're going to wear your hunting coat on the plane to save space, the way a lot of people do. Make sure there's no ammunition left in there when you come back.
Stay tuned to the Ducks Unlimited podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, after these messages.
Do you find it easier to fly with double guns over semi-autos, or is there any preference there, or are you just going with what you got?
I just go with what I want a gun that works, but the cases I have are all takedown cases, so I can take whatever I want in them. And I like it. More compact gun case is nice. And say wheels are the key thing. But no, we're talking about, I flew into Mexico a few years ago, and it was to a shooting event, not a hunt. But this just speaks to knowing the regulations when you go go to a foreign country. It was also, there was a 3-gun shoot held concurrent at the same event. And we had to register our guns and the serial numbers and everything with the Mexican military on the way down there, which we did, except for one of the 3-gun competitors did not write down the serial number of his rifle scope, or maybe it might have been a red dot. I didn't even know they had serial numbers, but yeah, they do. And if you don't and he was there for a long time. We were all back at the hotel, and he came in several hours later after trying to straighten that out with the Mexican army. So flying into other countries is harder, not Canada, but you just have to learn the rules ahead of time, and it's not a problem. And it's and that just doubles the anxiety, especially when in this case we were being checked by the military, which was made it maybe even a little edgier, but it was all fine. They knew we were coming, and except for this poor guy who had not copied the serial number of his red dot.
Yeah, I would not think of that. I mean, I wouldn't even understand why you would need to do that, but I guess that's really why you should research the country. And most of these have pretty good websites where you can get detailed information. Yeah. I know Canada's really good about it.
The other thing you need to do if you take a gun out of the country is there's a customs form, and I forget the number of it, that you need to fill out, because when you come back, and it's not just guns, it's anything of value, you need to be able to prove that everything you're bringing back is took out of the country, or you'll need to pay duty on it. So, and that's a form that not everybody knows about, but it's one you really need to have.
Yeah, for people out there taking notes, it is CBP form 4457. You would think that I knew that right off the top of my head, but I actually just looked at your column and read it out. So yeah, it's something that you just have to, you just have to be able to state. You leave with it, you come back with it. That exactly. I've filled out that form before many times, and you just leave it in the case itself, and they'll see it, and then in that way, you don't have to pay duty on that, or and it makes your process getting back into the U.S. a lot easier.
Right.
So we've covered the planning. Doing some research. We've covered, packing. We've covered the cases. Now, one question I had for you, because I did not do it, I never flew with a gun prior to 9/11. Now, did you do that? And then how much has that process changed that you can remember?
I can remember shooting ducks in North Dakota and then driving really fast to the airport and just like running in and throwing my gun on the carousel and running onto the airplane. So yeah, it's different now. My plane, I remember that because we thought we were in time, and the flight they'd moved the flight time up. So I got to the airport and I was running. And I used to be able to run through airports too. And I was running and just toss it on, and then that was it. So it was quite a bit different. And I remember my dad telling me that, taking a gun on board an airplane and having the flight attendant ask him, well, what's in the case? And he said a shotgun, and her saying, is it loaded? And him saying, no, it's not even put together. And that.
So he brought it on as a carry-on.
Yeah, in the 60s you could, yeah. But that was a long time ago.
Yeah.
And not the way we do things now. So yeah, so I do remember that. And it's, but air travel in general was a lot easier then.
Now you did mention that you traveled last week. What exactly were you going to do? And I'm just curious as to what you were going to shoot at down in Texas.
We went to San Antonio and then went about an hour southwest and hunted white-winged doves.
Nice. I've never done that.
I hadn't either, and I want to do it again. They fly higher and in flocks than more often than mourning doves do. And on a windy day, which we had the second day, they will hurt your feelings pretty badly. But it's a lot of fun. And it's a big thing down there.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of people go down there to shoot white wings. I'd never done it before. Really enjoyed it. I really like dove hunting in general. And but here at home, we hunt mourning doves over spinners, which is a totally different type of shooting. And so this was fun to get a different, a lot of high shots. Got me ready for duck season. So if it ever rains here, I'll be able to shoot ducks when they skip up over top of the blind.
Yeah, before we get you out of here, I wanted to kind of run through that with you. You are in Iowa.
I am.
We have gone around like a lot of the Great Lakes states. We've done some of the Central Flyway updates here with John Pullman or Jay Anglin, some of our contributors. But what is Iowa looking like right now? And I think I know the answer, but I want to hear it from a local.
Very dry.
Yeah.
We have not, we're I think in our fourth year of a drought. And this is either the worst one or it's just been a cumulative effect. But the ponds I hunt usually are completely dry. And unless we get a lot of rain this next month, they will be. And I'll be hunting on the river. Our reservoir, where a lot of people hunt nearby, is very low. It might be coming up. I think it's coming up a little bit because there was finally some rain on upriver, but about 3/4 of the state is in severe drought right now. It does not make it easy. The Mississippi, there will be ducks there, and there always are. And but yeah, it's not looking too good for a lot of us. And I think some other parts of the state, some of the smaller wetlands up north central Iowa do have water. I know I talked to a friend of mine who had a great teal hunt up there early on. It doesn't take very much water to float a teal, though. So it doesn't look good for us, though, unless in these rains that they keep hitting Minnesota and Wisconsin, they kind of miss us. So we're in a bad way right now.
It sounds like you might have to just pack up your gun and travel, right?
I think so. I think it would probably be that is the plan, is to hit the road and find some water and a duck somewhere this fall.
Awesome. Now, I was going to say, how does that impact your pheasant hunting? Because I know you really get into the pheasant hunting up there too.
I do. Typically, drought is not as bad for our birds as it is farther west.
Mm-hmm.
What was really hard on our pheasants is rain during the nesting and season, when the chicks can get wet and die of exposure.
Yeah.
We have a dry year, we usually do okay. And our numbers, not as much in my part of the state, but up along the Minnesota border, are supposed to be really, really good this year by 21st century standards, which is not what it used to be, but still pretty good. So I may have to hit the road and find some pheasants too.
Awesome. That sounds like that'll keep you busy for a little while you're waiting on that rain, for sure.
I hope so. I don't have to wait. I hope I don't have to wait until next fall for that rain, but it's been a long time coming. We need it.
Yes, you do. Like I said, I knew the answer to that, but I just wanted to get it verified by you. And I think John Pullman touched on it a little bit last week, but he's over in South Dakota. I think they've even had a little bit more rain over there than you guys have. Like you said, it's kind of skipping all around you.
Yep, it is.
Well, cool, Phil. This has been great. This is a good conversation to have any time of year. Like I said, traveling with a gun. We really kind of talked more on air travel, which is, a lot of people are doing that now, and it's a big business for waterfowlers to travel around the country and try different areas, try new experiences, and be sure to research. Domestically, you want to check out the specific airlines. Internationally, you definitely want to go. Every country has a website where you can get that information. But is there anything else that you can think of that, waterfowl hunters this season need to keep in mind before they pack a bag and fly off with their gun? Specifically,
no, but I'm going to say that if I'm going on a trip, I'm taking a 12 gauge just because I know a lot of people like to shoot the small gauge guns now, but it's universal. There'll be ammunition for it. If I don't bring my own, or I run out or whatever, somebody else will have it. So I'm going to take a gun that works and a gun that shoots 12 gauge shells. Nice. That's a good point. 12 gauge, much easier to get ammo, and typically you can borrow it from someone if you need it. If you don't, your ammo doesn't arrive or something like that. If you're digging around trying to find somebody with 28 gauge, it may not be there. Right. So exactly. And if I'm going with a group of people, we might not all take an extra gun, but one or two of us will. So we've got one in case somebody in the group has trouble, because it's not likely that they'll all break at once. But so just one or two extras for the group. No, you'd hope so. Yeah, you would think. Well, Phil, this has been great. I appreciate you taking the time to talk to us about this, and we'll probably have to get you back on here real quick before you get out there pheasant hunting, and hopefully you'll get some water so you can get some ducks. I hope so too. Thank you very much. All right. Thanks, Phil. Take care. I'd like to thank my guest, Phil Bourjaily, Ducks Unlimited magazine shotgunning columnist, for coming on the show and talking about air travel with a firearm. Very important topic. I'd like to thank our producer, Chris Isaac, for putting the show together and getting it out to you. And I'd like to thank you, the listener, for joining us on DU Podcast and supporting wetlands conservation.
Thank you for listening to the DU Podcast, sponsored by Purina Pro Plan, the official performance dog food of Ducks Unlimited. Purina Pro Plan, always advancing. Be sure to rate, review, and subscribe to the show, and visit ducks.org/DU Podcast. Opinions expressed by guests do not necessarily reflect those of Ducks Unlimited. Until next time, stay tuned to the Ducks.